Caution: before you go eating random plants off the forest floor, please consult experts, field guides, and multiple sources. Definitely do not trust some random backwood misanthrope like me to be a source of pure and unwavering knowledge. Hello y'all. Today we're going to be making a kimchi using all of these spring ephemerals that I've taught you thus far. We have bok choy rather than napa cabbage. Well, we do have a napa cabbage, but it's probably the most depressing napa cabbage you've ever seen in your entire life. It's like a little shriveled up like white brain. There's barely any green to it. We'll make one with this, and we'll make one with the bok choy. I'm gonna leave the bok choy as whole little miniature cabbages, but I'm gonna do some prep to the napa. What we want, well, we really want this just to be a proper size napa cabbage, but what we're gonna do is flip it upside down, go to where you have the stem, like the heart of the cabbage, and you're gonna cut down just through half of the way of the cabbage, and then you're gonna peel it. Wow, this is a depressing little beast. What we're doing here is if you cut all the way through, you lose a lot of the little bits, and we're just trying to get the leaves to unfold. So that way, the only piece we lost of the cabbage is that. And then we have the two full halves. Holy moly, this is so sad. Okay, now that we have our cabbage prepped, however depressing it may be, we need to make a salt brine for each of these things. So both our napa cabbage and our bok choy weigh 500 grams or just under. And the recipe that I typically follow is 20 grams of salt in a brine for every 500 grams of cabbage. So what I'm going to do is measure out my 20 grams of salt, add it to, you don't need to really get it in, just sprinkle it over top. And 20 grams of salt for the bok choy. We're then just going to add water so that they all stay submerged. Now that these are sitting in the salt brine, I'm going to let them sit here for about 15 minutes before giving them a good thorough rinse. This is what I'm doing to help clean the cabbages and to start the wilting process. The wind was getting to be a little too much, so we're going to continue this recipe inside. I poured out the salt brine, and I didn't let it go to waste. I'm trying to create a soil that's suitable for growing some saltwort, because I want to try to incorporate that into some recipes. And now that they're drained, we're going to add another 20 grams to each batch. And how we're going to add this next 20 grams is by opening up the leaves and taking some salt and sprinkling it inside the cabbage. And this is what's really going to help us wilt the cabbage and break down the cell walls and release a lot of juices and flavor. Now we're going to do the same thing with the bok choy. We want to sprinkle this right into the heart of each of the bok choy. You don't got to worry about making this too salty because we're going to give it another rinse after this. It's not like a traditional lacto ferment where you would just add 2% salt to the mass of the ingredients. We're definitely already going past 2% salt, and I've added more, and I may add even more salt to this yet. Now that the napa cabbage and the bok choy are both salted, we're going to let them sit for about 8 hours. We are doing this until the leaves can bend without cracking right over at the stem. This means that they've softened up all the way. About every 2 hours in this process, I'm going to check in, rotating the batch of bok choy, and see if I can press the salt as this loosens up further and further into the Napa cabbage. Probably the most important step of this whole recipe is to spend that 8 hours watching the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which comes in at 7 hours and 36 minutes. So you have roughly 24 minutes for you to prepare yourself a meal. I'm going to have some of my last batch of kimchi with some pickled eggs and rice, and enjoy some wonderful cabbage-themed episodes.
In the world.
Rotten cabbages? What kind of slum do you think this is? Oh, my cabbages! My cabbages! I told you already. No vegetables on the ferry. One cabbage slug could destroy the entire ecosystem of Ba Sing Se. Security! My cabbages!
Our 8 hours are up, and I ended up just combining all of the cabbage together, and look how much water is coming out of there. There's a little bit more left in there still, and see how this bok choy, it just bends over real flexibly right over at the stem, and it's still going to have that crunch that you want, but it's softened up. Oh, they're very salty still. And it's softened up and it's let out a lot of that water content, and in turn it's going to absorb the spice that we hit it with. So I just gave the Napa cabbage and the bok choy a really good rinse. I got all the salt crystals out, and now that I have them in this stage, I'm going to separate them into their own batches, and we're going to do one last thing to the bok choy. We're just going to cut the base of the stem off. To be honest, I don't really know why I'm doing this. They're probably still edible chunks, but it's like a monkey see, monkey do kind of scenario. Starting with what I think is the most important ingredient aside from salt and cabbage is gochugaru, which is a Korean red pepper flake. It's really well ground down. You don't see chunks of seeds, or you can't really tell skin from the inner part of the meat of the pepper. And it lends a beautiful red coloring, and it's like the best spicy taste. Actually, I like jalapenos a little more, but I don't know. Maybe I should try a dried jalapeno pepper kimchi one day. And what we're doing is adding roughly 2 tablespoons to each batch. And I'm just eyeing this out. And that's all it really needs to be. You're looking for however much spice you personally can handle. And I look for a little bit of aesthetic because I like it to be that bright red. With the bok choy, all we really need to do is just give it a good mix. You don't need to worry too much about it getting right into the middle of these because they bend open pretty much on their own. Like this here, holding the middle leaf, it's all folding out. But just making sure it's all mixed and it's getting in it everywhere. We're going to add some sesame seed next, just about a tablespoon. And then a tablespoon of fish sauce. That's all the ingredients from the grocery store. We're going to add in our wild ingredients from the bush, starting with a couple trout lily leaves. We're just going to add these in whole because they're pretty tiny to begin with. Next, we're going to add in our spring beauty, and then I'm going to chop some leeks and toss it in there. We have our batch with the bok choy all mixed and ready, but with the Napa cabbage, there's a little bit more we want to do with it. We want to massage all that chili flake into the folds of the cabbage. Otherwise, this area doesn't really get any of that flavor. So this part, if you got sensitive hands, you want to wear gloves, but if you can handle a bit of the burning sensation, then just go at it with your fingies. If you have air bubbles like this, you risk having a mold outbreak. So I am slowly going to put all my body weight onto that and just try to squeeze out every last bit of air. Another trick you can do if you're having a hard time is run a chopstick down the side, and that allows the air to squeeze out and up. And it allows a channel for the juices to go down. So since that's also wanting to pop back up, I'm going to use a glass weight. And the glass weight just keeps pressure on the top and makes sure that all the elements of the kimchi are staying underwater. And that makes this an anaerobic environment for the lacto-fermentation to happen. Basically, the whole process here is keeping it in a saline solution void of oxygen, and that is how we control it to have the bacteria that we want. If you didn't put enough salt into this or had air trapped in here, large amounts of it, it would be a prime spot for harmful bacteria. And this is a way you can preserve food for much longer, and it's a way you can bring out some really tasty flavors. We're going to then cap it. I'm using one of these little silicone gaskets that I made 2 years ago now. Holy. Anyways, what it does is this piece of silicone, as it's sitting flat, will start to bubble, and then as it bubbles from the expanding gases, that little hole will open up and it does like a little burp. It releases all the gas and then closes up quickly to allow no oxygen to squeeze back in. I've put a quote on this from a wonderful friend, Blessy, who I mentioned before in, I think, the trout lily video or the leek video. Probably both. Anyways, it says fermenting for a sustainable future or the apocalypse. Not claiming it as my own. Blessy, you're the genius philosopher. So these are going to be out on a shelf for a day because it's getting much warmer here than it has been. And then I'll put them into the fridge for at least a week. And I'm still making my way through a batch of kimchi, so these might be anywhere from opened to a week to a month from now. There's a couple more things I want to say before I end this episode. I met a man who lives down the road about 8 or 9 weeks ago who owns a chunk of land that I had been hiking on, and I found a bear den in his backyard, and when I found it, there was actually a bear still in it. I was coming up over a hill, and as I rounded a ridge, I could see down into a hole, and I could see a big bear's face staring right back up at me. It was a little weird mid-pandemic to knock on a stranger's house. I'd met him on the road like 2 days beforehand, but it still felt weird to go up to someone's house and knock on their door. Anyways, introduced myself, told him the scenario that the bear was just up on the hill, dropped a Google Maps pin so he could know exactly where it was. Because it turns out he's a kid as well, and that they walk through their backyard in a loop that kind of goes around where this bear lives. Turns out my neighbor, Morelli, runs a pretty large scale food agriculture business, and he has a factory that's just starting to produce fermented pickles. So I'm going to be trading him one of these batches for one of his jars, and I've been meeting a lot of really cool neighbors, and I just thought I'd share this because it's one of the changes that has come with the pandemic that I hope sticks around with us post-COVID-19. I usually don't get to meet my neighbors, and I find people are typically a little more standoffish, but I think with the limit of contact that people are actually much more friendly right now to interact with strangers, and especially if it's across like a street and not up close. So I just wanted to end this on a nice positive note, and thought I should at least mention the bear and show you the den. I thought that was pretty cool. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.